Subway famous $5 footlongs. So many sublicious choices, like the Delicioso Spicy Italian. And when you enjoy any regular footlong, order one of the many Subway $1 footlong sidekicks, like 21-ounce drinks and tasty sides, just $1 each or less. The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't
The
care.
BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
All right, it's a somber BS Report, a bombshell announcement today. Not really a bombshell if you've actually been following this closely, but it looks like Kevin Garnett's going to miss the 2009 NBA playoffs. I had to call our friend Sean Grande, the radio play-by-play voice of the Boston Celtics, and a longtime KG watcher to get his take on the whole thing. How you doing?
How about them Bruins?
What are you going to do in mid-May when you go on vacation?
I have no idea now. I got to you got to look at the whole vacation schedule. Everything is set up a certain way, and when you'd want to go to a certain city, like Paris in May. You always just rule that out if you're with the Celtics. But now you gotta take a second look at it.
Maybe you could moonlight. Maybe you could do some WNBA.
That's true. They get started earlier. All these possibilities. See, this is the thing. This is the beauty of you. You got to look at the bright side. You got to look at the doors that are now open, and not the ones that are closed. Although it's funny, I was telling people, I think that the Celtics are still going to have a shot to beat Orlando. Certainly, I think there's a lot of fascinating things in the immediate aftermath of this you start to look at, and one of them is the pressure that's now on Orlando to beat the Celtics, as they did twice without Kevin Garnett. And if they can't, and it's certainly within the realm of possibility if the Celtics win that series, especially with home court advantage, a season that may have ended, and in my opinion, probably was going to end in Cleveland anyway. The season could only end 4 or 5 days sooner than it was going to anyway. It's just going to be a completely different feel now.
Well, we agreed on that potential Cleveland exit, and we both had the same reason, which is that it's just too much to ask Paul Pierce to defend LeBron James 7 times in 14 days and then carry the team offensively. It's a little far-fetched.
Yeah, and I don't think that was ever and the Celtics certainly were not going to win, I don't believe, a 7th game in Cleveland. They might have won a game 2. They might have won a game 5 in Cleveland, which is why they had a shot. But they weren't going to win a 7th game. I think there has to be, I'm sure that there are a lot of fans in Cleveland today sort of celebrating and getting excited, but there has to be those hardcore fans, the good ones, the good fans, who are kind of disappointed today because now there'll be an asterisk, and it's already setting up, and I know you have the same kind of brain I do when you start to think ahead. Next year, 2010 is almost setting up like this winner-take-all. Last year with LeBron going into free agency, last year the big three probably together in Boston, last chance for both. You put your ring in the middle, and the Cavs, presumably, if they get theirs, put theirs in the middle, and we'll play for the whole thing in 2010.
Well, we both love wrestling, so the ideal scenario would obviously be the Bob Backlund trilogy.
That's right.
You win the first match or whatever, the count out, and then the Texas death match, something, and then it's settled in the steel cage. So 2010 is the steel cage.
We call it the blow off of the feud. The third and deciding, WrestleMania main event next year.
Well, I got to ask you. Well, let's talk about KG. I want to talk about KG first, and then the big picture implications of the Celtics. You follow KG. You were doing the TV for Minnesota for how many years was it? 5 or 6?
3.
3?
But it's some of them seem like 5 or 6. There was a lot of changes. God, how old do you think I am?
I thought you were. You're not 60. I can't.
Well,
remember.
Broadcast years are like dog years when you're in this business. So it's like those old Alpo commercials.
Right. Well, but you followed this guy pretty closely, and you were the first guy in Boston, first media guy to really try to tell people exactly what this guy was going to do for the franchise, and he did everything. Now, he's recovering from this secret knee problem. The details have never really come out. The team's done a masterful job of kind of hiding the information. What do you think his exact injury is? Because nobody seems to know.
Well, there's a tendon strain, and it's a tendon strain is going to get better when a tendon strain gets better, and it doesn't go by the schedule of when Cleveland and Orlando come up on the schedule or when the playoff starts. It gets better when or if it gets better, and I think, you start looking at surgery now. If you make the decision to shut it down and you're looking at the whole off season, maybe you look at things a little bit differently, but I got to say, as much as it pains me to admit it, I think you and your MVP piece yesterday had said it better than it's painful for me to admit when anybody says anything better than I feel I could say it. But the idea of playing at that, the way he has played for 14 years, you do accumulate a lot of hardcore miles. And I think Doc Rivers and the Celtics did an amazing job over the last year and a half limiting his minutes to the degree that nobody ever had before. But it wasn't the 31, 32 minutes a game he played last year. It was the 41 minutes a game he played in meaningless games for Minnesota those last couple of years that probably did a lot more of the cumulative damage. Although if you do want to look at one thing as being more of a specific injury, it did happen on a certain play. There was a Rondo lob play against Utah, and he landed strange on it. And I think the play that sort of set him back when he started to come back was the game in Orlando, which I know a lot of people saw because I'm pretty sure it was in that. Yeah, it was a TNT game. It was a Thursday, or it was a ESPN Wednesday night game. And it was the same play that Rondo threw a lob early in the game. KG caught it, and he started dragging that leg after that point. Yep. And so, the biggest enemy here, the scariest part, is trying to keep Kevin Garnett off the floor, because obviously he was trying to force his comeback. He didn't want to hear anything about it because he knows when Orlando and Cleveland come up on the schedule. He knows when the playoffs started. And maybe the best thing here in the big picture is just to tell him no. And it's really hard. And I would not have wanted to be the guy to tell him that he wasn't going to play.
But when you start talking about code words like knee immediately swelling up, knee locking, this seems like more than a tendon strain to me. This seems like something structurally wrong.
There's probably a bone spur, a couple of bone spurs in there. I do the games with Cedric Maxwell here in Boston, and I think this situation has really kind of struck with him because he had an injury that kept him out for a long time after they won the title in '84, the following year in '85, and he always felt he was sort of rushed back, and that Red felt he was dogging it. And where it really comes down to is only the player knows in this situation. Only the player knows. He knows his body better than anybody else will ever know it, and any doctor is going to tell him. He knows how he feels, and if there's something wrong in his knee, he knows it. He's known it for a while.
Can I just say something? Can I say something? Max did kind of dog it.
Well, that may or may not be the case, but being
he signed a huge.
He loses some credibility on that issue because he didn't necessarily rush back. But there's also the element of him knowing that he knew something was wrong that other people were not diagnosing, and that can be frustrating too. I think the difference with KG obviously is that he would he would turn cars over to you talk about that intensity with which he plays to get back in and play, but it's just his body's not willing.
Max also signed a huge contract after the '84 finals and showed up out of shape. I don't think that was helping his case. KG just seems. This reminds me a lot of the Larry Bird situation in the last two seasons Bird played, when his back just gave out. His back just said, "You know what? I've had it. You've played at this pace now for 12 years, and I just cannot hold up anymore." And I wonder if Garnett's knee has just reached that point.
It's possible. As I said, the only reason that if I were to go against that theory, it's only because it did happen on one specific thing, and maybe that was the tipping point. Maybe that was the straw with the knee that broke the camel's knee in this case. I think there is a lot to the wear and tear element, and the fact that what's frustrating, I think, for people and fans is this whole idea of setting dates. And I've talked to Doc and a lot of people about this specifically. In the old days, they just told you it's ready when you're ready. But now we have all the news outlets. Everybody wants to hear 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, or he'll be back for Game 3, or he'll be back on Thursday afternoon at 11:30, which it isn't good on a couple of levels because it gets fans to pinpoint a day. And also, I don't like it when they tell players you're going to be out for 2 weeks. Just tell them that you're out today. And then players start mentally letting down and thinking, well, I'm not going to be back for 2 weeks, and it takes them a while to work their way back. But, in this case, as frustrating as it is today, there is nothing more we're going to know about Kevin Garnett's knee and his ability to play in 09, 2010, or whatever we decide we're going to call that season, the 09-10 season. These are all new things for us. that's not going to be decided today. The issue today is, can the Celtics beat Chicago without Kevin Garnett? Can they beat Orlando without Kevin Garnett?
Well, see, I would add something to what you just said, which would be that I kind of think they knew all along that the knee was this bad. And I think there was a little, and I have a column that's going up today, and it'll probably be up by the time people hear this, but I do think there was a little competitive one-upsmanship here with the Celtics where they kind of knew. They knew that even if he's coming back, he's going to be playing through pain, and you're putting the onus on him to decide how much pain he wants to fight through. But the guy was not going to be the same. And I don't really think they wanted Orlando, Cleveland, or the Lakers to know that. So I think they did a little bit of he's coming back. Yeah, we're hoping next week. Yeah, we're hoping 2 weeks from now. Because you don't want Orlando to think, hey, KG's messed up. We got these guys. Why would you want them to think that?
I think it's more to the point. What was there was nothing to announce. I think, is today, among those of us who've been around this team, some sort of major shock? Of course not. I mean, this is not a surprise in any way. This was the day we knew from the beginning that one of the most important days. I'd say it's almost 3 weeks now we've known that today was going to be the most important day. None of the remaining games were important. It was going to be the practice that was sort of set aside. That was going to be the make or break practice. But
the fan base and the national media, and I've watched the shows where these guys are like, when Kevin Garnett comes back, it was always when. It was not if. Because they're not around it, they didn't see it.
Yeah, I think if you were around the team, it was pretty apparent. We've talked to Kevin Garnett about the situation. I think everybody was hopeful. I think you're sort of discounting the element of wishful thinking that was in there, and that you have to make plans for both sides. And there's now the other upside, which is that relief that comes with not having to wonder every day if he's going to be able to give you 15 minutes or 25 minutes or 6 minutes, or when is that moment and he's going to be out there in Game 4 and he's going to bump with Joakim Noah and they're going to collide knees, and that's going to be the thing that puts him out for the rest of the playoffs. You don't have to, you don't have that sword of Damocles hanging over your head. The sword has already come down. I think there's an element of relief in that. There's an underdog card that the Celtics are going to be able to get to play, which you never imagined they would, and it's going to be fascinating, I think, to see how specifically Orlando reacts. I think the Celtics certainly could beat Chicago with home court, as well as Derrick Rose is playing down the stretch, and he's a scary young man right there, without question. But it's going to be an interesting few weeks to see how these teams that you're talking about, not knowing the news, how they react to moving one step forward on, it's like the old Johnny Carson talk show that everybody slide over one chair. Well, now Cleveland moves up to number one spot in the Lake, and now everybody can smell this great opportunity and see how they react under that pressure. Now in Cleveland, they're talking about Orlando being favored in that series and the pressure on them now to get to the conference finals. The pressure on Cleveland now is immense, and they haven't had to play with that kind of pressure on them because when they went 2 years ago, that was a Cinderella ride that LeBron carried them on. Now they have a team to beat.
You talked about rushing back. The Celtics actually did this with Kevin McHale in the 87 playoffs. Yeah. He got hurt in the regular season, did not break his foot. I forget what the exact injury it is. I think it was maybe like a slight stress fracture or something like that. And he came back first round, broke it, and then played the rest of the playoffs, basically limping through the playoffs. And, I think with the Celts, I don't think they wanted to rush him back because they didn't know exactly what the knee injury was. But on the other hand, it didn't seem like it was getting better. I think they thought, oh, by the playoffs, it'll be manageable for him. If there's a pain, he'll be able to work through it. And to hear that, it just swelled up in 20 minutes. Yeah. It almost, do you, honestly, if you had to guess, do you think they secretly had a surgery here that we don't know about?
No. Again, I think we live in this cynical world in which nothing ever really surprises you anymore. I don't think that. I think they were hopeful, as most people were. That was when we talked to people in the first days afterwards. There was a lot of the shrugging of the shoulders, and this should happen, and this could happen, and this might happen. But there wasn't anything definitive. And to have a surgery means you're sort of making a determination that I don't think people were really ready to make. I don't even think today. I think today what happened, and this is how the news cycle works. Today was the story exploded when Doc Rivers did his weekly, his radio interview on the flagship station, and it was coming 5 minutes after him seeing Kevin Garnett and him making this determination, and that was in the moment that, there's no press release from the Celtics. There's no date that Kevin Garnett's going to have surgery and he's not going to play in the playoffs. This was a visceral reaction of Doc Rivers seeing Kevin Garnett play. And I think he also seeking some sort of resolution and relief. A guy who had to coach, speaking of the sword of Damocles, he had to coach every day for years, not knowing whether Grant Hill was going to play on any given day. So he's been through this, throughout the course of his career. And this was his reaction, and that was the news of the day. And because everybody wants to write the big story, of course it's a huge story. He's not going to play, but nobody is saying definitively he's going to have surgery. He's not going to play. We've all assumed it. A lot of us have for a while, but that is what is going on today. So we're all looking for, there's going to be surgery, and he definitely won't play in the playoffs 100%. And the problem with this specific injury is that there was no reason ever to announce anything, and there really isn't today other than he's not going to play. We're not going to see him in the near future. And I think the most important thing, what Doc Rivers is doing today was not sending a message to the flagship station or to ESPN or to the fans. I think he was sending a message to the rest of his team. Stop looking over your shoulder, because Kevin Garnett is not walking through that door.
Oh, nice. A Patino reference. I got to say, I think this started last year. And I think it started a lot, his play started to suffer, and people thought it was because he had the abdominal strain or whatever the injury was. If you look at his rebounding numbers, and I'm looking at them right now, for last season. So he averaged 11.8 rebounds in November. That dipped to 9.1 in December, 8.5 in January. And that's really who he became, up until now. He became this guy that used to routinely get 12, 14, 15 rebounds a game, and now is getting 8 or 9. I don't think he ever had the same explosiveness after that first month. I really don't.
No, I think, the other school of thought there would be that, he never really played with a true center in Minnesota. His rebounding numbers are always high. Kevin Garnett and Kendrick Perkins, was able to get a lot of rebounds. Rebounding numbers are you got to be careful with him in the NBA, because that's how Mark Blunt made $30 million.
That's true.
The power forward on that team was Walter McCarty.
Yeah.
And Walter was not going to get a rebound, so Mark Blunt got all these rebounds. He had some 20 rebound games in his contract year, and the rest is history. Travis Knight. Rebounds per 48 minutes. That's how he got paid by another super.
Look at Dwight Howard.
45 seconds. Right. But also, look, Kevin Garnett's numbers per minute. His numbers, if you have him on your fantasy team, Kevin Garnett wasn't the same player he had been in years past, but that's because his minutes were cut from 40 to 32. His numbers per minute were pretty much right on. This year, there was more of a drop, I think, in his numbers per minute than they were last year. And he's never been a guy who played near the basket and has moved farther away as his career has gone on, as older players are wont to do. And I don't think anyone questioned. That was the whole thing about these, the new big three, was that where are they in that arc? They're obviously not at the height of their power, but where on the downward arc are they? How close are they to that top? And
as it turned out, Ray Allen was much further back on that arc than we realized.
Ray Allen was hurt last year, and that's right. I think people underplayed that notion that we talked a lot about him having trouble adjusting to being the third guy, to coming into a new situation, to all the other elements, and not factoring the fact that he was coming off double ankle surgery. And we saw what a healthy Ray Allen this year can do, and he had an amazing year, and now he's going to have an even better playoff. And that's why.
If I told you though, in the summer of 2007, I told you we're going to win the title in 2008. And in 2009, one of the big three will be holding us hostage with an injury, and we won't even know if he'll play in the playoffs, and he probably won't. We would have guessed Ray Allen.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, by process of elimination, no question. But also, as you remember, we talked about this quite a bit. I really thought, just going to show you about having the opportunity to win when you have it, that I really thought the Celtics were better constructed, and we talked at the beginning of last year, I thought the Celtics would win in 2009 and not in 2008 because of Rondo, because of exactly kind of what's happened, that Rondo and Perkins would be much better at this stage than they would be in 2008. But it's a lesson there are many teams throughout NBA history you point at, and there's none better, really, keeping it with Kevin Garnett, than the 2004 Timberwolves, where you have to roll the dice. You got to go for it. When you have that opportunity, you got to go all in, because you don't know when strange things like this can happen the year after. Minnesota did that, and they had injuries with Sam Cassell. While Zerbiak was hurt, and they had everything kind of go wrong in the conference finals in 2004. But it was why I think there was almost that element last year, that last year in Boston wasn't. There was a lot of pressure to have that great regular season, but there wasn't that all-out, this is our only chance to win the championship. A lot of people were talking about a 3-year window, and that's when it's dangerous. And again, coaching staff drove the team. It says there is no 2009, there is no 2010. It's Apollo Creed. There is no tomorrow. There's only this. There was only 2008, and this is why, because you just never really know if you're going to get that opportunity. Although, next year, again, forgive me, I'm scanning ahead to 2010, but I think I'm just fascinated to watch Cleveland and Orlando play as favorites now, and with the pressure on them, knowing that the Celtic team didn't exactly come apart at the seams without Kevin Garnett. It was an 18-9 finish. It's a good team. They struggled to win a lot of these games. They were close games, but last year the Celtics went into the first round having obliterated the league. It was one of the top 10 seasons in NBA history. I don't care what anybody says. The facts are the facts. And the Atlanta series caught them off guard because they hadn't been challenged. Now, this group that's going into the playoffs Saturday, has been challenged every night. They've been in these playoff-type games, and they've been tested over and over again, and they've won an awful lot of them. These close games down the stretch, and you have Leon Poe getting healthy is significant here, and he's looked good physically these last 2 nights because now he's going to have to play a lot of minutes. Marbury is a wild card. He could steal a game here and there. So this all of a sudden, for a team that everybody is now writing off, this becomes a pretty dangerous Boston team for Orlando and Cleveland.
The column I handed in today, I said that the best thing that they have going for them post-KG, I'm going to say post-KG for 2009, assuming he's not going to come back. I don't think he is. But they have the nobody believes in us factor now. The entire team, and they've done it. We've seen them do it the last few weeks. When KG went out, everybody just sucked it up. People stepped up whatever they were doing. Pierce, I thought, played maybe the best 10 weeks of his career. All-around sense. Just unbelievable.
I'm going to jump in all over because I had to look. I had to turn my ballot in today, and that always becomes this ordeal that I always make so much more difficult than it should be. Because I look at my guy Max, and he just fills his out in 10 seconds and sends it in. It's like a golf putt. You shouldn't stand over it for an hour lining it up. Just fill out the ballot, go with your instincts, and hand it in. But I just agonized over it, and I did not put Paul Pierce in my top 5 for MVP, but he had the kind of year that made you look at it. That made you look really, really hard at, the other night was the perfect example. It's a meaningless game for the Celtics. Meaningless.
Yeah.
Paul Pierce decides he wants to play. He and Doc go at it about how many minutes. Doc says, I'm not playing any more than 30 minutes. Paul says, fine. And he had the most efficient 30 minutes you could have, and he carried his team to a win in a meaningless game that really could have deflated the Sixers if the Celtics had played the Sixers, which we all assumed they were going into the final day of the season. And you go into Philadelphia against a team that's had a losing streak and desperately needs a win here late, and Paul Pierce just carried this team on a meaningless night to a win. And it's been that kind of year. It's been really something to watch him mature as a player and a person over the last few years.
I would say meaningless is not a strong enough word. They had no reason to try in that game. Zero. And, I saw Pierce out there, and I thought, why is Pierce playing? This is stupid. And then as I'm watching, I'm realizing they think they're going to play the Sixers, and he wants to make the point clear that KG or no KG, are going to beat the Sixers. And he lays the smack down and has a great game. They win by 2. No Ray Allen, no KG.
Ray Allen, yeah.
I just thought that game for me, I wrote this in the column today, I thought that was the defining game of this particular season because this team is just plugged away. And honestly, they won 62 games. How many games do you think, giving everything that happened this season, given the fact that they won a title last year, this team should not have won more than 50 games?
At the start of the year, I make a little, a chart on my laptop for every game. So if there are notes that come up about, Oklahoma, I can put them in the little Oklahoma part of the schedule. And I have the team's record at the start of each game. For my own amusement, at the beginning of the year, when I type in Game 82, Washington, April 15th, I put what I think the record is going to be going into that last game, and I put 60. I didn't notice it till yesterday, till I got to the file, and I put 61-20. So I thought the team would win 62 games at the start of the year, and it was this patience of Job, Murphy's Law, gauntlet of a season of injuries and crazy schedule because of all the national TV games, and never in 11 years in the league have I been on the road as much because of the way the travel schedule fell this year, everybody getting hurt, all the different things that happened, and yet they got to 62 anyway, and It was a remarkable season, and here's what, again, I've been accused of sometimes overshooting with literary references and trying to tie everything together. So I opened last night by quoting who I think is a seminal figure of certainly our generation, and that is the great Thornton Mellon, played so poignantly by Rodney Dangerfield in Back to School, in which the catchphrase for his line of clothing, that you may remember his Tall and Fat Shop, was, if you want to look thin, stand next to fat people. And the problem with this season, the reason nobody appreciates the 2009 Celtics, is because the season is lined up against the 2008 season, which is one of the great seasons in NBA history. And here's a team a year later without a bench nearly as deep, without James Posey, and that was significant, especially now. Imagine if you had James Posey now to play some of those minutes for Kevin Garnett. And instead, they won 62 games. You had the two long win streaks. You had the 19-game win streak, a franchise record, a 27-2 start, which is an NBA record. You have Ray Allen, this historic year from the free throw line with the two streaks, and chasing Calvin Murphy's record, which Calderon ended up breaking anyway. All of these things that happened to this team, and yet because it's gauged against 66 wins and a world championship, people aren't going to appreciate what this team did, and that's a shame.
I had them for 63. And you had them for 61?
I have 62.
You had him for 62 exact.
Yeah. And I would have, given up on that a long time ago. Had you told me at the start of the year, no Kevin Garnett, and for a third of the year, and again, what happened was there was a game, the third game of the year. The Celtics actually beaten Chicago easily in the second game after beating Cleveland, which turned out to be an impressive performance coming on ring night with all the emotion. They went out to Indiana and just got hammered, and it was really the first knockout loss they had suffered in the what we call the new Big Three era here these 2 years, and that were 2 days, couple days before the Houston game. And everyone, that was time to think about, oh my gosh, they're not that good, and their Posey thing is really going to kill them, and everybody changing their expectations. And then they had that game against Houston, in which they had so many of those at the start of the year, and you called them, and rightly so, the defending the belt games. Right. Which they were so bound and determined to not be one of these teams like Miami, who won the championship and then fell flat the next regular season, that they just went all out from the start. And they had all these teams that they played that were sort of challengers to that throne. Houston, and then Portland and Orlando and New Orleans. All these teams came into Boston early in the year thinking that they were going to make a statement. You had teams getting pumped up every night like Atlanta to play the Celtics because they were the champ, and the Celtics sort of rose to that level. And you had, with everybody shooting for them, they still had the first 27-2 start in NBA history, which is why they won 62 games. And it was as a lot of people said yesterday, Doc said this last night, he enjoyed, thinks this regular season was more of an accomplishment than last year's one.
I agree, and I honestly, the 62, I keep saying honestly, I don't know why, the 62, that Lakers game sent them into a tailspin, which you forget. For some reason, it kind of knocked their confidence out of them for about 2 weeks. And if that game had gone a little bit better, you're talking maybe 66, 67 wins. We
talked on we did the podcast here right before Christmas, and you were getting all jacked about 70 wins. And
I was.
Who was going to be you were trying to find guys from the Bulls to be the Mercury Mars or whatever of
Steve Kerr, yeah.
Right. And you go through this long enough, you see the ups and downs, and they happen. I think it was less losing confidence than it was that. Again, I'll go back to golf, and this is one of the reasons I stopped playing, because I didn't have the mentality for it. You could be going along nicely, and all of a sudden you have that one bad shot, and it wrecks your round. That bad hole wrecks your round. It takes you a while to get it back. That's the Josh Beckett, the old Josh Beckett theory. You have 3 dominant innings, and then in the fourth he'd lose it, and he couldn't get it back. And it takes you a while. And they had tough. Cleveland was in that stretch, and some teams that played them tough, like Charlotte, and so. You know what,
Sean Grande? I really like that theory, and I'm going to steal it and not give you credit. The golf theory.
Let me tell you a little bit about my life. Every night before the game, we record our pregame coach show with Doc, and I will pose one of my theories. So I said I've tried very hard to stay. It's very, anyone can go from local radio to national TV. It takes a very special someone to work backwards, as I have throughout my career. So I've worked very hard to stay anonymous, and I'll come up with one of these great theories, and then Doc will go have his pregame, gaggle with all the media, and he'll always steal one of my ideas, pass it off, and that's why all of you people go, oh, Doc, he's so charming with the media, and he always says these great things. It's because he steals them and throws me under the bus.
Well, that Lakers game was basically a triple bogey.
Well, that's right, and then it takes you a while to get it back, and also they were going so hard for so long at such a crazy pace, and you realize that you weren't going to keep that pace up for the season, and it's a long year, and you want to, again, go and tying everything back to Garnett and hope that he'd be able to come back here late. You're just building towards this because you know there are going to be ebbs and flows during the year, and you're just trying to get your team back together again. But the Celtics just ran out of time to get Kevin Garnett back, and I don't think they're going to hold the playoffs up for a few weeks to see if it's going to work out.
You're a horribly biased person to ask this question, but was Doc Rivers the coach of the year?
No. And, it's funny, I'm kind of getting some grief because I did not have him in my top three. First of all, let me step back and say I think Coach of the Year is one of the dumbest awards we give because it's almost like, Doc was Coach of the Year in 99 and he was a better coach then than he is. Hasn't gotten better as a coach. It's a really stupid award in a lot of ways. I just try to I tend to be contrarian and pick people I don't think are going to get the attention. Like, as I said, did Mike Brown do a better job? Did he get more out of a team because of the year LeBron had? It's so easy to qualify any of your choices, and then you have that natural Eric Spoelstra thing because he had all the extra wins that Miami didn't have last year. But I tend to pick out guys that I don't think are getting attention for the things they had to get through. Say it again?
Who'd you vote for?
I voted for Rick Adelman. And I had Nate McMillan on my ballot as well. And I had the regular cast of characters with, Stan Van Gundy. I might have voted Mike Brown third. And, Doc is there and Stan Van Gundy. I kind of roll my eyes at that one because I think that it's on a bigger scale of most improved because it's, improved from what? It's the start of the year to the end of the year. Is it, whatever. It's like, hey, who the heck ever heard of John Salmons a year ago? And look at the year he had in both places where he became a legitimate player who people in Boston are going to learn about in the next 2 weeks.
And not in a good way.
Not in a good way.
You know who I voted for?
I'm sure you'll tell us, it being your podcast and all.
Nobody. They don't give me a vote. But you know who has a vote? Ernie Johnson, who sits in a TNT studio and drinks Dasani waters with Charles and Kenny.
And keeps that thing together.
Somehow he has a vote and I don't. And all due respect to Ernie, who's my single favorite studio guy. But why does Ernie get a vote and I don't? What games is Ernie going to? He's in a studio. If you're not going to give me a vote because I don't go to the games other than the Clippers games, then how does Ernie get a vote?
You've got League Pass. You can see the same games that he can.
I deserve a vote.
You know what? I think that you should. I think you should. Had I known that, I would have done that secret thing where you could have told me who you wanted, and we could have passed it in as.
You know who I would have said? I would have said Scotty Brooks.
Scotty Brooks is eventually.
I would have given Scotty Brooks his one vote. Come on, who had a harder job than Scotty Brooks? That team was 2-23.
The other thing I hate, and I always do this, and we've got because we're in 2009 and we got dragged into it and we had no choice. Max and I have a Facebook page and we put our votes. I don't think it should be a secret ballot. I hate that. If you're going to, we're not voting for the leader of the free world. This isn't a political thing. If you are covering the league and you feel confident about the guys you're voting for and you have no agenda, put your votes online so people can see them. And if they want to rip you for it or debate it, that's fine. But I never thought it should be a secret ballot.
I'm very glad you brought this up, and I cover this in my book. I am against anonymous incompetence in all forms. If you're going to be incompetent, at least do it publicly. Don't submit stupid votes. Don't vote for Hall of Famers that don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, and then hide behind it and not tell us what you did. Hey, your Facebook group is called Grande and Max.
Grande and Max, yeah.
I think I'm going to join
Max group. I think you should join the Grande and Max group. We're just kind of starting, and it's just a way so people can. I think the best reason is because I will go on these tangents as I do on these podcasts, and I'll say something the other day like, "Hey, every game the last night of the season started at 8:00. I got to tell you why." Because I just found out why that was, and a lot of people were asking me. And then the game goes on, and Max gets distracted by the hot dog vendor, and something happens, and you forget that you never finished the point. And the Facebook page is a way for people to say, "Hey, Grande, you moron, you didn't finish your story about why they're playing every game at 8:00," which turns out was for ESPN, so they could have a flexible schedule on the last night of the season. I thought it was a really cool way to make sure nobody was looking at the scoreboard and jockeying for playoff position, but.
Your career
like those things, it was all about ESPN.
Your career continues to make me angry. You should be much more well-known than you are. I think you're great at your job. I mean, you're my friend, obviously. I'm going to say this stuff anyway, but I truly believe it. You do a great job. And I don't quite understand why I see some of the guys that I see doing games, and you're not one of them.
Well, don't tell
I feel
anybody
like
because
you did something terrible.
Very hard.
Yeah, but you did something terrible, though. I think.
Sometimes I wish I had. Sometimes I wish I had done something that would, you had some awful, deep dark secret, like on Us Weekly or something, like Grandy's dark secret. What is it? But I kind of like the end. I'd be a really bad celebrity anyway with paparazzi and stuff like that. It wouldn't go well.
For God's sakes, there's like 8 first-round games this week. You should be doing one of them. Hey, so we think, I personally think we're going to get by Orlando. I'm not sold on that team. I don't think they have a lot of heart. I think they fold. But I don't think we beat Cleveland.
That Shaq Stan Van Gundy thing is going to come into play, isn't it?
Yeah, probably will. You think they get by Orlando, right?
I think they've got a shot. I'm not a big buyer of Orlando. Well, Magic did beat the Celtics twice without Garnett down the stretch. They were both very close games, but again, a lot of pressure here. I think Orlando's really. I think Chicago could have given Orlando some difficulty because of Derrick Rose against Ray for Alston, and then I think Brad Miller would have messed around with Dwight Howard a lot.
I did a podcast with Bucher and Stein on Tuesday, thinking Chicago was going to be the 6th seed, and actually predicted that Chicago would beat Orlando. I guaranteed it on the podcast. And
there was some sentiment inside the Celtics of thinking about Chicago as a possible second-round playoff opponent as opposed to first. So, you weren't alone.
And it's not – and, the biggest advantage they're going to have is the coaching matchup because I'm not sold on Vinny. But you talk about Derrick Rose and Rondo, that pretty much cancels each other out. Then they had the Ben Gordon thing, who, the Celtics have always struggled against. And Salmons, for some reason, has always been a tough matchup for us, too. Yeah. Brad Miller has always killed the Celtics, always, since he was, in high school. And then they got some young legs. I don't think it's an easy series. I really don't.
Nothing's going to be easy now. To whatever degree it was before, it certainly isn't now. The world has changed, and it's another year later when you're talking about us dominating the coaching matchup. I think it's a wonderful.
I thought he did a great job this year. Last thing, because I know you have to go. Rank the Undertaker, Shawn Michaels WrestleMania 25 match for me in the pantheon of all-time great matches.
This is going to break your heart in a way that hurts me to do it.
Okay.
I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it either.
I'm saving it. Obviously, all the people whose opinions I respect and trust are talking about it as this extraordinary performance in the career of Shawn Michaels, which is truly saying something, and I think I'll give you something nobody else has. The greatest irony is that Michaels' serious injury, the one that almost ended him in '98, happened in a match against The Undertaker at the Royal Rumble, which was on its way to being this amazing 5-star Shawn Michaels match, and then he got hurt and had the vertebrae issue that basically kept him out for 4 years. And this is just something, if it were treated like a sport, everyone would be talking about. This would be outside the lines E60 piece about Shawn Michaels missing 4 years, like Guy Lafleur. Remember, Guy Lafleur missed all those years, and then he came back, and Shawn Michaels is at the top of his game after he missed 4 years of the prime of his career. It's like,
Jordan's a good comparison, I guess.
Jordan. Yeah, I don't want to be sacrilegious. I was going to say Ali missing the 3 years of his career, but I think an injury and political reasons are a little bit different. I haven't seen it yet, but everybody says it is unbelievable. And you think about, Undertaker is not one of the great workers. He's a great performer, but he's not one of the great in-ring workers of his generation. And if this match was as good as everybody says it was, that's amazing. Yeah,
but when you talk about Shawn Michaels, and unfortunately, there's not a baseball prospectus for wrestling, and there's not people writing about it in like a big picture sense, really. But in my opinion, Shawn Michaels is one of the best 3 wrestlers of my lifetime. I would put him in the top 3.
No question. Yeah, he's there with flair. The problem is he's got the early career. He was not a good locker room guy, in another sports terminology, and he was really difficult in his younger days. And when he was the champ 10, 12 years ago, and all the issues with Bret Hart and having injuries or not having injuries, and that sort of tainted his legacy and put a damper on what he was doing in the ring. But now that he's had this second career, he's already a first ballot Hall of Famer. Definitely
one other thing hurt him. The hair in the early 90s did not help his cause.
No, but
the extended mullet.
I would say, back then I had hair. I was very, that was a good time. So we all can't be judged by, the hair we had back in the day.
A very good point.
Like the Karl Malone suit on draft night. You can't. You got to take him out of the Hall of Fame for that.
Let's come on in a couple weeks. Let's make a vow to both see the match, and we can discuss the Celts and where that match ranks, because I have not seen WrestleMania either, and all the same people I trust, who are different than your people that you trust, but the same types of people, all say it's top 5, top 3, somewhere in there. So we'll figure it out.
Good deal.
All right. Good luck, Sean Grande.
All right, man.
Talk to you soon.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.